Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We are recording this on Friday, September the 26th, and it's showing the next day, Shabbat, September 27th. It's going to be showing on Shabbat Teshuvah, when the theme, of course, as is the case for the season, is teshuvah, the Shabbat of return. And so, colleagues, what I wanted to do today is to examine a little further the complicated teaching from the Talmud Berakhot, Rabbi Abahu, who said that the place where the penitent stands, the person who's a tzaddik gamur, the person who's consistently righteous, cannot stand. And the Talmud seems to be privileging the journey, the learning, the growing, making mistakes and learning from them, hurting people and repairing that damage. And it's just interesting that the Talmud makes that call, that there's something uniquely laudatory about the trajectory and the arc. And what I wanted to do was to explore the idea behind that. Why is that laudatory? Why does Rabbi Abahu, why does the Talmud admire somebody who falls and then gets up, who breaks and then repairs, who mistakes and then redeems? Why that trajectory? What is it? What are the ideas behind celebrating that learning and growing versus just saying be a mensch, be a mensch, be a mensch? It doesn't say that. It has more texture. And then I wanted to look at three secular artists whose work ties to the themes of teshuvah. So let's thank God for the gift of learning Torah together, and then jump into it. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Ba'arev na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu u'b'fi amcha be'Yisrael. V'nihya anachnu v'tzatza'enu v'tzatza'ei amcha be'Yisrael. Kulanu yodei shemecha v'lomdei Toratecha lishma. Baruch atah Adonai hamelamed Torah la'amo Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. So, what are the ideas behind celebrating that learning and growing in that trajectory? And we're going to take a look at the thoughts of three thinkers who are different genres of thinkers. Maimonides, who's obviously a rationalist, Rabbi Nachman of Bratslov, who's a Hasidic master, and then the Alter Rebbe, who is really the founder of Chabad-Lubavitch. And they each have different ideas. This is, of course, comes from Copilot. And the ideas are short and evocative. So, Elias, you want to just read the idea as Rambam sees behind it?
Rambam, Maimonides, Rational and Ethical Elevation. In Ilchot Teshuvah, Laws of Repentance, chapter 7, Rambam writes, the level of penitence is greater than that of those who have never sinned, because they have tasted sin and distanced themselves from it. Key ideas. Rambam sees teshuvah as a moral triumph. The penitent has overcome temptation and made a conscious ethical choice. He emphasizes free will and the power of transformation. Teshuvah is not just about erasing sin, but about elevating the soul through struggle and growth.
Right. So, okay, thank you. So, what comes up for you when you hear, this is kind of Maimonides' rational lens on Berakhot's teaching, Rabbi Abahu's teaching, and what do you hear him saying?
I think the most interesting part of it is the free will part, because it's something that's really so much part of our tradition that, God creates us, but then lets us decide the path that we're going to take. It's such a very Jewish ideal, and oftentimes it's missed. So I really happen to love that idea.
Yeah, I happen to agree with he says. Who cannot agree with Ramban?
Right.
But how many times we, doing a comparison, how many times we have things in our lives that we enjoy, but we don't really fully comprehend, the immensity of the meaning of it until we lose it.
Right.
All right. And then we start appreciating it more. So in a way, when you have seen, you've seen that, and then when you come back from that, it's like, wow. In a way, I agree with that. Elevating the soul through struggle and growth. I mean, I don't think that is that rational. You find that rational?
well,
He's
it's right
talking
that-
about soul.
So
Ye-
that's a piece where the co-pilot does a lovely job of summarizing, but I don't think really captures something that's essential in Rambam himself, which is when you look through the actual chapter here in chapter 7, what you find is a big emphasis on work and the kind of moral cultivation that takes effort and sustained challenge, and also on behalf of those who are encountering somebody who has gone through the teshuvah themselves, that it's not just about sort of what the Baal Teshuvah gets, but also what the responsibility of the community is with respect to that Baal Teshuvah. You're not allowed to remind that Baal Teshuvah
Right.
of what they have done before. And yet, he says, this one really popped out for me, that the Baal Teshuvah, if somebody does remind them of their past deeds, they should hear this abuse and rejoice, knowing that they shouldn't be ashamed, because every time that they have actually reflected on those sins that they committed and they aren't doing them again, they're gaining, he says, their merit increases. Zechutam
right.
merubeh.
Yeah, and one thing that I like about the key idea is the first one, that it's a moral triumph, because basically, when you never struggle with any kind of temptation, you are on your own path, all right? But when you've done it once, and then you come back from teshuvah, I would imagine that you are constantly fighting,
Right.
within yourself not to
Right.
do it again. It's not a one done, I come back from teshuvah, that's it. I don't think about that anymore. So it's a constant moral triumph, that elevates you a little bit.
Yeah,
Right.
it's a moral trajectory.
Right. So the idea is, and Maimonides has the idea that teshuvah gemurah, full repentance, is that you are faced with the same temptation, and this time, not only do you not succumb to the temptation, but you no longer even crave the temptation. That's full healing. That you no longer even want it. That's how you've fully healed. And if you can do that kind of healing, whatever your X is, I used to do X and X was wrong. That you have done teshuvah is you stop doing it, and then you so changed yourself that you no longer want to do it. That is a major trajectory, and that is worthy of celebrating. That kind of thing.
So
yeah.
the other question is that it goes back to, what about the people that don't ever succumb to temptation, and how hard that can be also, whether if you live a life that's completely devoid of ever succumbing to any kind of temptation, that's almost the same as this, I think, in a certain way, because it means that every minute of every day, there might be something that you're tempted to think about or do, and that you don't.
Can you guys just, before we leave this idea of you no longer even crave it, and that's being completely penitent, that's full repentance. I'm curious about how that theme has played out in your own lives, if at all. And I'll just share one example with me. It's not a moral issue, but it was a very day-to-day practical issue. I grew up, a grocer's son, and I ate red meat twice a day, every day, forever. And I had no idea there was anything wrong with that. And in fact, when Shira and I got married and she would travel, I would run over to the butchery and buy ribs. And I had a special big red pot. And when she was gone, I would just put ribs in the oven and heat it up and eat it. I was a complete carnivore. And then I did teshuvah, and I've been a vegetarian now for 25 years.
I feel sorry for you.
Yes, and yeah. No, but the Maimonides thing that clicks with me is I no longer even desire it. It's not like I'd love a good steak. I'd love a good ribeye steak or a good rib or a good hamburger, but I love it, but I have stronger temptation. But for me, going from being a complete carnivore to being a complete vegetarian is so fully changed my character that I literally no longer desire what I used to have twice a day.
Right, and
every day.
that is actually remarkable, because it's completely the opposite on my own experience. So, being from South America, from Argentina, big meat eaters, I didn't grow up kosher. My parents were not kosher. My house wasn't kosher. And then I became kosher as I grew older, and studied at the seminar. And I have a group of friends here, Argentinian friends, that I socialize very often with them. Some of them are not Jewish, some are Jewish, but they don't keep kosher. So we go out, for asado, for barbecue. And they have these pieces of meat that are unbelievable. and I have to eat a cheese sandwich or fish, or eventually they bring Hebrew national hot dogs.
Well, I think we can
Anyways,
all.
no, but you know what
Yeah.
I mean. For me, it's every day. I
Right,
have
but-
to reassure myself not to
Right.
succumb to temptation.
But I found that so inspiring about you, because when we were in Israel after having been in Poland on the March of the Living, and you were searching out that kosher place where you could have a kosher cheeseburger, like, it was truly amazing, because you're finding ways to not only resist that temptation but also to elevate it.
Yeah. Any other thing come up for you when you think about Maimonides' high bar?
No.
That-
This is a question that I want to. It doesn't have an answer, but it's a
All right.
question that I want to pose, because we are talking constantly about sin. Okay, sins. I have sinned, and as you know well, in Yom Kippur, Kol Nidre and Yom Kippur Day, we are going to recite many times Al Chet Shechatati Lefanecha. So
Right.
that prayer contains 54 different types of ways of sin.
Right.
But they are so broad in the spectrum. It goes from cheating in business, cheating on your spouse, to gossip. All right? So when we are talking about doing teshuvah, it's hard for me to put them all in the same category, because when you talk about badly about somebody with your spouse, I've never done that, of course. So, you say, okay, we have to stop, and that's it. But when you ruin your life, like the CEO, of what was it?
Astronomer.
Astronomer, it's very different. So, and the levels of teshuvah are very different. So, I mean, what do we do these days? I mean, do we believe in these 54 types of categories?
Well, I think the Maimonides. Thank you for that. It's a perfect way to wrap up the Maimonides piece, which is, I think, that when you read one of those sins from the Vidui that resonates for you personally, gossip, that that the Maimonidean goal here is, first that you stop gossiping, and then that you so stop gossiping that you don't want to hear gossip. You don't want to hear, you don't want to trade in it, you don't want to share it, that you have changed, right? So you're not the kind of person, you want to talk about ideas, or you want to talk about books, or you want to talk about literature, you want to talk about where to eat, or you want to talk about sports, but you don't want to talk about juicy, saucy gossip. And that, I think, is a perfect wrap for the Maimonides thing. Maimonides challenges, can you change so deeply that it's no longer of interest to you? And I think that's the Maimonidean wrap on this teaching about the Baal Teshuvah. Okay, Nachman of Bratslov. Michelle, would you read that? Rabbi Nachman teaches that.
Sure. Rabbi Nachman teaches there is no despair in the world at all, and that the greatest light comes from the deepest darkness. Teshuvah is a journey of the heart, often born from brokenness and yearning. The Baal Teshuvah reaches deeper spiritual levels because they've experienced distance from God and long to return. The emotional intensity and passion of return can surpass the steady path of righteousness. Rabbi Nachman often speaks to the power of longing and how the penitent's yearning creates a unique closeness to God.
Okay. What comes up for you, Michelle?
So here too, I found this to only scratch the surface of Rabbi Nachman, because there's a very deep piece of his theology that underlines this, which is that there can't be despair. There can't, because nothing is ever fully broken. If you imagine the original brokenness of the world, where God tried to, put God's light in, and the shards shatter, there's still a piece of God's light here that's always accessible to you. It's simply covered up by the brokenness around it. But the reason not to despair is because, at least for Rabbi Nachman, as I understand him, is that with that original breakage, it's a model for our brokenness. There will always be a little bit of light. There will always be something you can resurrect. There will always be something that can be done better. And therefore, teshuvah is simply returning to that which is already existent.
Yeah.
In other words, the pain and darkness that we have,
That's the schmutz of
that,
life.
right, and the goal is that pain and that darkness can inspire trajectory of light,
Or
and
of
healing.
the drive to uncover, to recover
Right,
that light.
right.
So I have a question for you, Michelle, because I think that without assuming this, Wes and I are on the same level. I don't think that Wes or I, with this silly example of the meat, are now in a deeper spiritual level because either you're vegetarian or because I eat kosher meat. Okay, I'm much more with Rambam that, you know, you stop doing it and then you continue working on it and then you struggle. But I mean, deeper spiritual level. Every time I see my friends eating meat, I'm so holy now.
No, but
you know.
let's talk about. I
No,
think.
but it's a question
Yeah,
because
so-
I don't happen to be so in agreement with Nachman.
Yeah. So
personally.
let's here. What comes up for me with this teaching. Actually, last night we went to see. Sher and I went to see John Mulaney, who is the fantastic comedian. He's just the funniest comedian. He's at the Wang Center, and he points out in his show that he's been sober now for 440 days or something like that. And famously, he was a drug addict and addicted to cocaine and addicted to all kinds of cocktails of different kinds of drugs. And he does a whole routine. Not last night, fortunately, but he had a show about an intervention where he comes to his apartment and 10 of his friends, who all happen to be the best comedians in the world, like the staff of Saturday Night Live, were there, and nobody was funny and nobody laughed and nobody did a bit. They all said, they were super serious, and they said, you're ruining your life and your life is in danger. And they basically caused him to go from that, and he was so angry, and he went into a rehab to deal with his cocaine habit, and he's now been sober. Plus, because he used to buy cocaine with cash, he was very successful. He had a lot of cash. That he now cannot have more than $200 on his person ever. And he talked about that in the show last night. And he's now, he's married. He has 2 kids. So I think and then he's a more public example, but people who are at AA, who have been sober, and we have many of them in our congregation, and they will say, I've been sober now for 30 years. That comment, and somebody who had not been sober 30 years ago, and they changed their life so that they don't drink, that there is a majesty in that. There is an inspiration in that. And I think that is that's different from the Rambam's, you used to want to do it, so you stop doing it. And there's a deeper kind of healing of the soul. And also an awareness of the fragility, right? Nobody ever says, they still say I'm sober or I'm a recovering alcoholic, but nobody ever feels like they're done with that demon. And I think that's what Nachman of Bratslov is getting at.
I was thinking about this also. This is really complex. How do you find the divine light in the people that perpetrated October 7th? In other words, we're looking for that. We're looking for that. A person who experienced October 7th.
But they have decidedly not done teshuvah.
No, I understand. I understand that. But
Where is that question coming from?
So let me explain what I'm thinking of. You're a family who experienced October 7th. You have a loved one that is a captive, has been a captive. And then how do you find in your soul a place that you can find the teshuvah for how you feel about those people?
I think then that the point comes that whoever does something bad, first of all, has to admit that it's something bad. Second, that the fact that he has to be within himself, the wish, the desire to do teshuvah.
So how
Dan,
do
I appreciate that. I mean, I think it takes us a little bit off of our path here. October 7th is its own very complicated field. But I'm thinking about us. We're facing Yom Kippur
Mhm.
next Wednesday night and Thursday, and so I want to come back to our own inner teshuvah lives.
Talk about
And I
Tanya.
again, so Michelle, can I go back to you about what does Nachman of Bratslov's kind of the greatest light comes from the greatest darkness. What does it say to us here at Temple Manual?
To me, it's so hopeful. This idea that it's inherent in the reality of the world, that just as there's a capacity for darkness, there's this capacity for light. I'm looking outside the window right now. I have an amazing view of the top of a tree that is changing. Right, so there's green and red leaves, and it's sort of half and half. And we know what's going to happen with that. All the leaves are going to turn a brilliant red, and then they will fall off, and that tree will be dry and brittle and without any beauty to it for months and months and months. But then ultimately we'll see again in the spring that tree will come.
Right.
And we view those red leaves not as a somber, sad, awful piece of the world that is dying. Instead, we understand that this is part of the capacity for generative regrowth.
Mm.
And I love this idea that Rebbi Nachman has, that all of us have that capacity for generative regrowth.
And let me just briefly check in with this third teaching from the founder of the Chabad movement, the Alter Rebbe. It's on page 3. Through teshuvah me'ahava, repentance from love, sins are transformed into merits. This is a radical, mystical idea. Not only is the sin erased, but it becomes a source of spiritual elevation. The energy used to sin is reclaimed and redirected towards divine light. The Baal Teshuvah has reversed spiritual entropy, turning darkness into light. And you think about, what comes up for me with that is how, this leader, the Alter Rebbe, is the founder of Chabad. You think about the Rebbe, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who lost a family in the Holocaust, and who lost, so many Chabad Jews died in Eastern Europe from 41 to 45. And he comes back and he uses that ultimate darkness as a springboard to the rejuvenation of clearly the most vibrant Jewish movement in the 20th and 21st century. And he had this dream, and Joseph Telushkin writes about it in his book on the Rebbe, that in the 1950s, he comes back, and two things. One is he does not want to talk about the Holocaust. He does not want to talk about anti-Semitism. He does not want to talk about hate. He wants to talk about love. He wants to talk about simcha shal mitzvah. He wants to talk about putting tefillin on. He wants to talk about learning Torah. He wants to talk about chesed and tzedakah. And this vision that a people that's been decimated, we should grow and have Jewish outposts everywhere in the world, so that when you go to name the far out crazy place, Thailand, for Pesach, there will be a Seder waiting for you. And that, I think, so the Tanya idea, how can we take the deepest darkness and flip it into the greatest light? That's literally what powered Chabad. Chabad, and by the way, Orthodox Judaism in general, was considered dead and dying and done and moribund, and it's so robust. And the idea is, how do you take the biggest challenges and make it fuel for the greatest growth? That is the Rebbe's greatness.
I like the three of them, honestly, because they are beauty on their own, and there are so many things to take from each of them. But the last one, to me, it doesn't speak much to the regular Jews in the pews of the conservative or Reform synagogues. Okay, this idea that you reclaim and redirect towards divine service, it's not. I believe. No, let me finish. So to me, the summary, the Rambam, overcoming temptation, chooses good. That's what the language of everyday life for regular modern Jews.
can I just gently push back and say, I think of all of them, the Tanya's is most urgent and relevant to our lives, especially to our young people's lives, to our college kids' lives, but all of our lives, there's so much energy worrying about, is the golden age of American Jewry over? And that conversation always tends to get into anti-Semitism and the amount of incidents and the amount of hostility, et cetera, et cetera. And if we're channeling the Chabad intuition, and they're the winning hand, the way to deal with the golden age diminishing is to renew the golden age. And the way we renew the golden age is by Torah and mitzvah. Actually, it's the most relevant. If you want a new golden age, do more mitzvot. If you want a new golden age, learn more Torah. If you do want a new golden age, do more chesed. If you want a new golden age, have a deeper Shabbat.
Why are you assuming that Rambam is not saying that?
Well, I don't think he's opposed to it, but I think the special sauce of the Tanya and of the Rebbe is to see darkness and challenge and defeat as the fuel for a rebirth. That's their special sauce. I mean, the Rambam's obviously great, and he's rational and all that good stuff. But I think what the Tanya wrote, and then what Menachem Mendel Schneerson did, and what Chabad does to this day. Actually, I saw a wonderful one of our college kids who is in a college that has both a Hillel house and a Chabad, and she said she goes to Chabad because it's just so much energy and so much fun, and all of her friends, and they're very acculturated 21st century 20-year-olds, and they are drawn to, there's some energy to Chabad.
Yeah, with the mechitza.
Yeah, no. Well, anyway, but the point is, I think the challenge here is for our Yom Kippur coming up Wednesday night and Thursday from the Tanya is, how does the darkness that we have felt spur even more light? What can we do? What do we do to restore the golden age of America, restore the golden age of the Jewish people, restore the golden age of our own world, and that we aren't passive and we aren't victims. It's about our own agency. What mitzvot will you do to add more golden to our golden age? I think so. Anyway, that is the resonance of that. Any other voices on?
No, you're 100% right. With the if you go to almost any college campus that has a Chabad, that's where the kids are going. Like when Emma was at USC, she went to the Hillel once, and then she kept going to Chabad week after week after week, and there'd be 400 kids there. And more than like 100 of them weren't Jewish. They would just love to come for the energy and the joy of
the dinner.
Just to put in a shout out, Hillel's doing a beautiful
Oh,
job.
I know. I'm not saying they're not. Hillel, I'm a big fan of Hillel.
My son goes to Hillel for services and
Chabad
for food.
I love right. No, obviously, and in a way they're partners. What I'm saying is that there's something about, there's an energy here. The other thing about the Chabad approach that I really admire is there's no attempt. Like I went to the John Mulaney show last night, and I now, because of all the energy, I don't wear my kippah in public when I'm at John Mulaney, because it's just, there's like a lot of energy out there, and it kind of it causes me some concern. And what I really admire about Chabad rabbis is they don't try to pass. They're just proudly who they are. They don't try to pass. They are, a Chabad rabbi looks like a Chabad rabbi, and that's the rabbi that's getting all that energy.
Which is a big piece of the Frida Kahlo
Let's
painting that you brought us.
Right, let's go to Frida Kahlo.
Which has that
Perfect.
resonance of, you know, who am I when I'm trying on somebody else's clothes versus who I am when I'm my authentic self.
So let's look at that. So Frida Kahlo is on page 9 of the handout on the two Fridas. And Michelle, would you lead us through the co-pilot treatment of Frida Kahlo, which is on page 10?
Okay. Which part of it? Do you want about the painting? Or
Frida, just read it. It's a couple of pages.
Okay, about the painting. The painting shows two versions of Frida sitting side by side, holding hands. One is dressed in European-style white with an exposed bleeding heart. The other wears a traditional Mexican clothing with an intact heart and a medical clamp stopping the bleeding. The vein connects their hearts, symbolizing shared pain and identity.
So, Elias, what comes up for you with that? the idea of, there's the European style white, and she's not her, and she's bleeding, and then she's dressed in her traditional Mexican clothing, and her heart is intact. She's not bleeding, and a vein connects their hearts. That is, these two Fridas are also one Frida, but two different. Do you relate to that at all?
I mean, when I first saw the picture and I read only the first paragraphs, obviously my tendency will be, she feels like she's missing her home country.
Right.
And basically she feels full with heart when she's there and not posing as somebody else who she's not.
Right.
When you read about Frida Kahlo's life, she had a very turbulent life. And when she was 18, she was in a bus accident that broke a lot of her ribs. So she lived the rest of her life in constant pain, okay? And then she had a very turbulent marriage with the husband, the painter, I can't remember his name. So, yeah, I mean, you'll have to convince me. Copilot will have to convince me about the teshuvah with these two.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going, Michelle.
I worry. No,
Yeah.
I worry about AI telling us what our art means.
Right.
Right. Because this is so rich and textured, and I was so curious, Wes, why you felt that this was a picture you wanted to bring for the topic of teshuvah.
Oh, wait, I forgot now. I remember now. Diego Rivera.
Right.
And if you go to Rockefeller Center in New York City, in downstairs, the level, there are all the paintings of Diego Rivera that are beautiful.
Yeah, this one really spoke to me because it's, the Hebrew for face is panim, which is plural. There's no way to say singular face. It's panim. Our face is faces. That's the way you say face in Hebrew is faces. We all have multiple faces. We all have multiple selves. And nobody has just one identity. And I was so curious about what spoke to me about Frida Kahlo was the multiple, faces and the multiple dresses and the multiple garbs and the multiple attires. And I'm always alive to that. I'm especially alive to that now, 2 years after October 7th. And so I think that Yom Kippur is a space for us to reflect about our multiple identities and how they connect with one another.
Not only the identities, but the struggles within ourselves.
Yeah.
And, connecting that with the idea of teshuvah, now you convinced me about Frida Kahlo and teshuvah, is that basically the concept that I was trying to expand a little bit, that once you struggle with something and then you come back from it, you will always be struggling the rest of your life with it.
Yeah.
It's not that you are cured, that's it. So the two hearts are the constant,
And-
vision, and the vision also the beautiful vision of the mirrors.
Yeah.
In the next one.
Before we do, I just want to just close with the fact that they're holding hands. These two visions of Frida, these two Fridas are holding hands. And I wanted to read that piece, Desire for Healing and Wholeness. The act of holding hands suggests a longing for integration, to reconcile the fractured parts of the self. Teshuvah is not just about regret, it's about reconnecting with one's essence, just as the Fridas are connected by a shared lifetime. So to me, one of the goals of this holiday is that the multiple identities that we each possess could be could not be angry with each other or in tension with each other, but could be holding hands with one another, because all of those multiple identities are us. Shabbat Shalom, and may we all have a very meaningful Yom Kippur and become the person ever closer to the person we want to become.
Chatima Tova.
Shabbat shalom.
Gama Chatima Tova.